Straight ahead, a frank discussion on Black participation in the political process in Louisiana. Has our political effectiveness peaked, or is it just beginning? The answer to that question and more on today's edition of Folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. You know, you just can't live in the state of Louisiana without talking politics. It's just a part of our regional culture. And today's discussion is on Louisiana's politics and Black participation in that process. Joining me in the studio with my distinguished studio guests are two distinguished platform guests. First, we have Dr. Huey Perry. Dr. Perry is a political scientist at Southern University in Baton Rouge. He has lent his expertise to dozens of scientific studies, mostly on the effectiveness of Black politicians. Also joining us is Mr. Bethel Nathan. Mr. Nathan is Senior Vice President of the Nathan Group, a public relations and political consulting firm in Baton Rouge, specializing in communications to the Black community. The Nathan Group boasts dozens of national clients, including the White House. Welcome to Folks. I might add that no discussion would be possible on Blacks in politics without you two gentlemen. I just wouldn't feel right about doing it. You are our acknowledged experts in the field, and we're glad to have you here today. I'd like to begin today's program with a brief statement from each of you on the state of Blacks in politics in Louisiana and or the nation.
That's really a very, very broad subject, and there are so many points that I could make to fill out that subject. But I suppose the most important thing I'd like to say in terms of my opening comment is to focus my comment on the future of Black elected officials. One of the things that we find is that there's been a decrease in the rate of increase of Black elected officials for every 5-year period between 1970 and 1985. If you take the first of those three 5-year periods, 1970 to 1975, the number of Black elected officials peaked. That was a 138% increase over that period. The second 5-year period, 1975 to 1980, the percentage of Black elected officials increased by 47%. The third 5-year period, 1980 to 1985, the number of Black elected officials increased by only 23%. So as you see, there's a decline in the rate of increase. Now, if you make the assumption that in a pluralistic society it's important to have political representation, representative of the broad population, then you would want to see the number of Black elected officials increase. The critical question, in my view, is where are those new Black elected officials going to come from? And perhaps the audience can share some of their thinking on that.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Mr. Nathan.
Thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here and sit with such a distinguished individual as Dr. Perry. Data says that Black population in Louisiana is increasing faster than white population. I think after the census, the 1990 census comes out, we'll see that, and this is a year that we have to go into reapportionment. Also, data says that by the year 2000, that minorities us being minorities, will no longer be the minority, will be the majority population in America. Politics is something that is a part of us and will be a part of us. And, you know, it's funny, it's interesting what you really comment on the statement or the question. But I think about this. We sit here in Baton Rouge, and let's just imagine a judge sitting in Alexandria, Louisiana, making a ruling. Now, we don't know this judge, we don't know the case, we don't know anything. But believe it or not, that ruling in Alexandria becomes a part of law, and what that judge says affects us right here in Baton Rouge, meaning this, That judge is elected by our votes. The political process is something that we have to be involved in. It is something very important. Politics is not a dirty business. It is not a dirty word. It is something that is absolutely 100% necessary. I think the 1990s are going to see a greater participation among blacks in the political process. I think that we have come to recognize and realize the importance of it, and I think the 1989 elections bears that out.
And we will talk a little bit more about that later, but my first statement has to do with the black elected officials right here in Louisiana. You mentioned that there was a peak in the number of black elected officials. I assume that stands for Louisiana as well as the rest of the nation.
Those were national figures.
Okay, those were national figures. At one time, let's say between 1970 and 1980, we saw the Black Political Caucus, the Black Caucus of the Louisiana legislature, as one of the most effective arms of government that we have. They got a lot accomplished. A lot of gains were made during that 10-year period for Louisiana's minority communities. However, recently we've been hearing in the newspaper and on television our black legislators disagreeing with each other in public about a lot of different issues. One of the most prominent was Governor Romer's tax plan. Some supported it, some did not, and they were very vocal about it. And I'm curious as to whether this means our political effectiveness through our legislative body as blacks is going to be diminished in some way, or what does that mean? And I'd like to start with Dr. Perry.
Well, I'm not troubled by differences among black legislators as much as some people are. In an ideal world, of course, it would be desirable to have all black legislators come down on the same side of a given policy question. But in a practical world, that's very difficult to handle. I think that you have differences because you have a maturation of black politics. And once blacks become to interact in the political process at a high level and operate in that particular milieu over a span of time, it is only natural that black legislators are going to differ on major policy questions.
Okay, but
in some respects, I think those differences are healthy.
In the past, though, you would not hear of those very public disagreements. They may have had them in the past, but we just wouldn't hear about them. We're much more open about them. Mr. Nathan, your reflections on that?
Well, it's like succumbing to the theory that we are black, we all think alike. We all go to the same place, we all think alike, we all act alike. They should disagree. Sure. I mean, I would have a problem. The problem I've had is that they all agreed all the many years. They should disagree. They're supposed to disagree. That's what politics is about. That's what makes it healthy. I'm glad to see them. I wish they'd disagree more.
Okay, I'm hearing amens from the audience. Is this something that you agree with? Should black politicians agree to disagree?
Yes, I agree with what Mr. Nathan is saying and also Dr. Perry, but I always question why is it that that it is viewed that we as a group have to agree on something, that there has to be a consensus. Why can't we disagree? Or why can't we come to a point where we agree to disagree on certain things? And that's what's happening, not only with the tax plan, but also with on the abortion issue. You had some politicians in the Louisiana Black Caucus who voted against and some who voted for. So, and that was healthy. There was nothing wrong with that. They were voicing their opinions also of their constituents, and that's something that you have to consider.
So you see it as healthy. Does anyone disagree with that?
It's not a disagreement, but the Black Caucus seemed to be a strategy in itself. Perhaps there's no longer a desire or a need for this strategy. Maybe someone, one of our guests could comment on this, the fact that perhaps the Black Caucus no longer needs this strategy in order to be effective within the legislature.
Well, they already, we don't have the Irish caucus, we don't have the Catholic caucus. You're already black when you walk in the legislature. You're already seen. They already know what you look like. You stand out going in the door. It's always been interesting to me over the many years over 10 years, I should say, since we started in this business, to watch that. Yes, they were effective. Were they going to be effective if they hadn't been a unit? That's hard to say. We can't predict that. But it's not necessary at this point in time. I mean, it's not necessary to collectively for all of these individuals to be in the same place at the same time agreeing upon the same accord. I mean, that day is past and gone. That's really a major problem that we have as black people when you look at it on a national level, on a local, on a state level as well. I mean, everybody's all the same, and politics is not that way. Politics is diversification.
Okay, that brings me to my next point. Now, Mr. Nathan, you know there are a lot of people in town who know that your business, you represent, you work for who pays you, and
that's right.
You
I'm
have
glad
many
you
Republican.
Didn't say I work for who Republicans.
Many Republican clients.
I work for whose check won't bounce. That's who I work for.
And Mr. Reed agrees with that.
And also those who don't lie to black people. I work for those. I don't want to. Okay, but go on.
Okay, so in other words, we realize you run a business full of integrity. I wanted to touch on the point that you've just completed a nationwide poll of
Correct.
black voters.
Correct.
And it's to our knowledge the first of that scope that's been done. You did almost over 1,000.
We did 1,038. The Joint Center for Political Studies has done many polls, but they worked it in conjunction with whites. They polled a certain number of whites and a certain number of blacks. What we wanted to do was test the attitude of black Americans on several subjects, using a methodology that we thought was most effective in order to get accurate responses. Over the many years, we've looked at thousands of polls and looked at the results of it and listened to many of the best in the business say, you can't poll us, or what they say when I'm sitting in meetings, they say, you can't poll them. And we say we are just like any other American, and we care about America, and you can poll us. So we went out and proved it and came out with some very interesting results.
One of the points was that you confirmed something that had been brought out in several other large polls, that black voters are fast becoming non-aligned.
Correct.
That the Democratic Party does not have a lock on black votes. That the block vote, if it ever existed, doesn't anymore. And whether you agree with those statements or not, numbers are numbers. Would you care to comment on that?
Blacks just won't vote for a candidate just because they're black. I mean, see, that's a perception that white political strategists believe. They believe in a race if you're black and against a black candidate, all black people are monolithic and they're all going to go down the road and they're all going to vote for the same individual. We've been able to, and there are many instances that cite that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't take place. The data came out. We found out that issues are totally different now, that civil rights is no longer the #1 issue among black Americans. We asked that question. We were really kind of shocked when we saw that, but 78% said they are more important issues than civil rights. And what made us put that question in was because United States Senator Ted Kennedy said after 25 years, what I want to do is go back in, let's update the Civil Rights Act. And we wanted to say, okay, 25 years later, do you agree with that? Now, first of all, Ebony Magazine did a special edition, I think it was, I don't remember, last September. So when Andy Young came out, and he kind of was a forerunner saying that. Andy Young said that what we've got to think about now more is economics. You know, we got to talk about money now. And that's kind of what the poll confirmed, that it was much more important things than the civil rights.
I'd like to hear some audience response. I see nods and frowns and yeses and nos. Did you want to say something about that?
Yes, speaking from the viewpoint of being a parent, first of all, and being a woman in business, I would like to say that I don't think that the most important thing is whether or not we as a group, as a race of people agree, but we are now more educated, which our forefathers put a lot of time and money into educating us. And because of the fact that we are more educated, we have our own opinions, and we are knowledgeable on many subjects, sure we're going to disagree, and that's healthy.
It's healthy. Mr. Reed, I know you wanted to comment. I was standing right by you.
Well, if you allow me to back up, just a few minutes ago, Mr. Nathan referred to a judge in Alexander making rules for which for us to live by. But also you must understand that there are a lot of people down here in Louisiana are using systematic methods of denying us our civil rights. So the federal government had to come in and say, I'm going to make a rule since you won't make a rule to do it. You pussyfooting around with it. we're going to go on and make some rules that I'm going to say you're going to have to go by. We're coming about the Black Caucus. At one time, the Black Caucus members, all of them had their same objective. They had a lot of things in common. But as the years came by, just because they were black, they didn't think the same way. So automatically, their objective become different, and each one tried to accomplish that which he wanted to get. And I think that's what happened to destroy the Black Caucus. They don't have the same problem just because they're black.
So let me correct. Now, what I meant when I said about the judge, Mr. Reed, I meant that we voted for the judge. I wasn't questioning. I just use that as an example. What I'm saying is that our vote put people in the office. We vote a guy in Alexandria. We vote him in Shreveport. I don't matter where we vote him in. We voted him in. I was making reference to the power that exists within our hands that we possess. That's what I meant. I wasn't saying that he made a rule that affected us, but let's assume that we voted. Let's assume the same judge got voted in and he made a rule that went against us that really, affected us as a group of people. All I'm saying is that it is up to us to be involved in the political process. We cannot hide from that anymore, and black people have for a long time hid from that. They have thought that politics was something bad, something you shouldn't participate in. That was the point I was trying to make.
Mr. Perry?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a brief comment about the poll that Mr. Nathan just referenced. It doesn't surprise me at all that in that poll it was shown that blacks do not see civil rights as their principal concern at this particular point in time. And the fact that they do not see civil rights as a principal issue is positive in my view.
It is.
Because it does suggest that many of the major civil rights victories have been won. And blacks have utilized those victories to increase their participation in the political process. The next major milieu to be penetrated by blacks, as Ms. Nathan suggested, is the economic sector. So they're concerned about unemployment, those kinds of things.
I think Mr. Nathan would agree with that. Now, taking this a step further on black voters and what's happening with the black electorate, black women count for the majority of new voter registrations. Mm-hmm. This is going to have some sort of impact on black voting patterns. Would you care to reflect on what it means and why? Why are so many black women registering? Where are black men? And what's going on there?
Mr. Nathan? Expert on that.
Well, if I go out and say the black society is a matriarchal society and women run it, then all black men that hear this going to say, now where did he come from? Why does he say that? But that's a fact. It's more black women. Our society is run by black women. They finance the church. If you look at Jesse Jackson's campaign, the bulk of his money comes from black women. And black women are emerging now. They're coming to the forefront. You're seeing them more. They've always been there. That was the backbone of the civil rights era. That's what held everybody up, but they were in the back. Now what you see is black women coming in the front. You're seeing what's always existed over many, many years anyway.
Dr. Perry?
That's really a fact of life. We can't argue with the data. There's been a significant increase in black registration in southern states, and the driving force behind that increase has been black women. There's just no question about that. And you're seeing that political campaign, the national campaign strategists are beginning to target their campaigns at black women. So we're seeing the implication of
because
that.
They vote. They're out. They vote. Let's take Louisiana for an example. We vote on Saturdays. Okay, well, who's out the street anyway on Saturdays? Black women. They're up. They go. They go.
Okay,
Well, when I say out in the street, I mean going to the grocery store. You're out. You're going to the grocery store. You're up. But it is more. First of all, you go after how many more, and it's more. There's 55% more black women in Louisiana, in the voting age population. So from a political standpoint, you want to go reach that number to start with. One, from an educational level, you got more black women graduating from college than you have black males. Yeah, it's just more of them are concerned. And when they sit down and look at data, when you start to strategize, you say, what's the easiest that I can go reach for the most, for my dollar in the most effective manner? And it's black women is the easiest one to communicate with.
I'm curious as to how this affects young black men. I see two in the audience that I know because I put them there. They're young black men. I'm curious to see what they have to say about black women coming to the forefront politically, and whether or not they see black male power somewhat diminished in the next, say, decade.
Okay, first of all, I don't necessarily see black male power, say, declining in the next decade, but I do see that black women are coming to the front more readily than the black male. But I don't, once again, I don't see that as a threat, because if it helps the whole black race, well, then it's better for the entire, total black person.
So you don't have a problem with that? It's a good idea. How about you, young black male?
I don't have a problem with it either. I see that most black women are becoming more and more concerned about problems and stuff in the communities and stuff like that. And that now I'm glad that we're, as a group, are actually coming to more of a leadership role and trying to determine our own future and stuff like that.
So everybody's
a lot of, excuse me here, a lot of legislation that's passed, enacted, voted on, talked about has a great deal of effect upon black women, because you've got larger numbers of black women who are heads of households. So they're much more concerned now about what a politician votes on. I mean, why does he do this? What is he? I mean, that's just a fact of life. Black women have a natural desire now to want to know, because they have a responsibility in terms of taking care of families.
Recently, we saw the election of many, many black males in very high governmental positions across the country. We saw Doug Wilder become the first black elected governor of a Confederate state even, but of the United States. Since the first black governor since P.B.S. Pinchback, we saw David Dinkins become the mayor of New York City, the major metropolitan area of New York City. We saw a black mayor of Seattle, where there is not a majority black population. And all over the country, there were similar things, and it's inspiring, but it's more than that. It means something. And I'd like to ask our political experts, what does it mean? Start with you, Mr. Nathan.
With me? All right. I'll yield to Hugh. I took his credit. Let me yield to Dr. Perry, because I took away what he wanted to say last time.
Well, actually, there's so much I'd like to say on the black women question, but I know you want to move on, so I'll move on. I think the 89 elections are very important in terms of understanding American politics. I've often said that symbolism plays an extremely important role in American politics. And beyond the substantive importance as to what those black mayors can do, and I think that they can do much from a substantive standpoint, it is equally as important to view these elections from their symbolic role. I think that election send a proper message that American society is moving to a posture where it can evaluate candidates, black and white, on merit and make voter choices based on merit. And I think that makes a positive statement about American politics.
Virginia has, I believe, off the top of my head, about an 18% black voting age population. I think it is 17-18%. Doug Wilder, if you watch this campaign, never mentioned the word black. I mean, he never said that. I mean, he ran a totally different type of campaign. So did David Dinkins, totally different type of campaign. They didn't talk about civil rights. They talked about issues that affect mainstream Americans. They didn't go out and say, vote among black people to vote for me just because I'm black. Now, on the other side, I think where a great mistake was made is that the opposition just didn't, I mean, they gave away a lot of votes. They took for granted that black people were going to vote for Wilder just because he was black. But that election was extremely close, very, very tight. And it says this, that blacks can get elected in America based upon the fact if you go out and put a campaign together that appeals to mainstream Americans. Now, the interesting thing is, though, is Jesse Jackson. Both of those campaigns, they said, Jesse, don't come. Stay away. I mean, please don't come in here. Because immediately if he came in, he loses. I mean, it's just that way. Jesse Jackson walks into a campaign and you lose. That's unfortunately, but that's a fact that exists in America because white people won't vote for you when Jesse Jackson comes. So here are two campaigns that had to say, don't come in. And Doug Wilder specifically said don't come into Virginia. Jesse came into New York right after the primary, right after Dinkins won the primary, and created one of the biggest stirs, one of the biggest controversies in existence. So after the primary through the general election, you never saw Jesse Jackson campaigning. And the point I'm trying to make is that politics is evolving and it is absolutely changing, and it matters not what color you are. If you structure the message and if you are a good, qualified, competent candidate, then you can go out and get elected to public office.
Okay, we have time for one more brief comment. Did you still want to say something?
Yeah. Okay. I guess my main comment is that Dinkins has been elected. Also, Walden. We see Mayor Bartholomew has claimed another term. What does this mean for blacks in terms of political participation or in terms of reaping some of the benefits? We know that these black candidates obviously must have been supported by white money or by PACs that supported them.
Okay, we have less than a minute and a half. Who wants to take it, Mr. Nathan?
Well,
quickly.
It simply means that we're in the game that exists in America. I mean, we finally we are learning how to play the game. In politics, I mean, that's what it is. It's a way of life. It's a fact. I mean, you can't get around it. So it means that we're coming into the fact of life.
Dr. Perry, the quickest of comments. We've got 30 seconds.
Well, I think in the best case I can give is New Orleans. Sidney Bartholomew was elected by majority white support the first time and has given more contracts to black firms than the entire history of that city. So it's still possible to do both.
Great. Well, we are evolving as blacks, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. And I'd also like to take this time to say goodbye. This is my final folks program for Louisiana Public Broadcasting. I am leaving to take a job in the frozen northern woods of the United States to do a program that's very similar to folks in a larger market. But it's been a pleasure being here. I want to thank all of my friends at LPB, all of the staff that have made it possible to do this for 5 years, and each and every one of you for tuning in and supporting folks with your comments and your letters and your criticisms and your love. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.